Yo, we're checking everybody. It is a breaking news edition of Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That is Jason Sucamel. And the Longhorns have just picked up a commitment from Oklahoma. He has officially flipped. Colton Vasek of Austin Westlake. As far as I'm concerned, one of the best players and prospects in the state of Texas. Jason Sucamel joining me to discuss the matter. Nick Harris from Rivals will join us in about 10 or 15 minutes. Thanks, guys, for joining us live as we talk about the breaking news. Jason, your immediate first impression on a guy that is really critical for this recruiting class for the Longhorns in 2023.
Yeah, it's a story, Catch. We've been monitoring. I think it was seriously less than a week after he committed to Oklahoma. It was August 1st.
It was 3 days.
Yeah, August 1st he committed to Oklahoma, and you heard the rumblings first about him not being happy, maybe with that 100% happy with that commitment. And it's just that snowball has just built and built and built over the last few months. And it just kind of became a matter of when, not if. Texas beats the pants off Oklahoma, and he's liking all these tweets. And then he visits, he's visited for multiple games this year. He and Arch Manning hang out all weekend when Arch was here a few weeks ago. So just a big, he's ranked number 82 nationally. I'm not sure that's not underranked by Rivals.com, honestly, in my opinion. This guy is a legit, I don't know if he's a 5-star type talent, but he's not far away from that. So huge get for Texas. You're taking one from one of your rivals, a conference rival, a regional rival, and just a huge addition for Texas. Texas needs, this is a Texas defensive class. Bo Davis, he's taken a lot of guys in big numbers, big numbers of defensive linemen, but hasn't necessarily landed that true elite blue chip. Colton Vasek certainly is pretty close to filling that bill. They're still working on guys like DJ Hicks, who definitely fills that bill. But just a big day for Texas. It's crazy. It's been a crazy, 36 hours? Monday morning, Texas loses a commitment, and then the whole Anthony Hill thing, which we can get into if you want to. But the addition of Colton Vasek, just a big day for Texas. Good day for Texas to be celebrating.
Yeah, let's talk about the rankings first. Jason, I'm with you. I think he's a borderline 5-star guy. I would probably rank him as one of these guys that's a super blue chip. Just put him somewhere in the national top 50-ish, and that's probably a good spot for him. I think he's been –
and he might get there. He's having a strong season, so –
yeah, no, I think he's had a sensational senior season. If you look at Rivals has him ranked higher than anybody else in the industry currently. He's a mid 4-star, 5.9 with Rivals, ranked number 82 overall nationally. I know that we'll talk to Nick Harris here in about 10 minutes, and I know Nick has seen him in person, maybe even a couple of times so far this season, and has kind of been wowed by the continued evolution of Vasek, who at number 82 overall nationally, that's number 7 at his position as an edge player, number 16 in the state of Texas. He'll be going up in my Lone Star recruiting rankings, which probably will be updated on Thursday. I've been teasing this for a while, but I think he's a state top 10 kind of guy. Just to go through the rest of the industry's rankings on him, and I think he's going to go through the roof for everybody. ESPN has him at number 184 nationally. That's way, way too low. On3 has him at 143 overall nationally, and 24/7 has him at 199 overall nationally. Frankly,
that's surprising.
All of those rankings are way too low, and if Rivals had that kid ranked, this is one of these where if Rivals would get beat upside the head, God forbid if they don't have. I think about the Cedric Baxter ranking from earlier in the year, and even now.
Rivals is wrong on that one. I don't mind saying that.
But Rivals is the highest on Vasek.
Nobody cares about that, kid.
And I don't know that means that any of the other 3 industry rankings groups will have people banging down their door about having him outside the national top 100. Rivals had him there at 82 really before the season started, and I think he's only gone up from there. To me, I was looking, Malik Muhammad.
I'm looking, Catch. He was ranked 76. He's actually back in June, so he's actually dipped a little bit this fall. Not much, but a little bit. But I expect Yeah, I expect he'll bounce back up though.
As do I. And, I think Derek Williams and Malik Muhammad are the two 6.0 high 4-star guys in the Rivals rankings on the defensive side of the ball that the Longhorns currently have commitments from. Obviously, both players, guys that you're probably going to be watching all the way until signing day. Vasek's position, to me, makes him the most important defensive commitment in this class. You think back to a year ago, they get Justice Finkley, they get Jamon Tapp. I don't think those guys are quite the prospect that Colton Vasek is. I don't think they're as quick and as explosive off the edge.
Have the frame. Tapp has a tremendous frame. I don't think Justice Finkley certainly doesn't have the frame that Vasek has. I mean, Vasek, he's 6'5", 6'6", listed at 230. I'd be curious. I want to talk to him. And I was looking at some old pictures I took of him like last year, and then I got some of this summer. His body really has filled out over the last year or so. I'm wondering if that 230 is still accurate. But he's a legit 6'5", in that 6'5", 6'6" frame. I mean, he has an NFL frame, the kind of NFL scouts drool over, and he'll continue to fill out, obviously.
And what a segue you just made for me, Jason, when I talk about his value and why even though he's not ranked as high as Malik Muhammad or Derek Williams at this point in the recruiting cycle, the fact that nearly 40% of all 4- and 5-star defensive ends in the state of Texas, period, forget about body profile or anything else, in the last 20 years, there's been almost no, other than quarterback, there's really been no more valuable position in the state of Texas than the defensive end position. 12 of the 22 5-star and 4-star defensive ends since 2002 that are ranked taller than 6'4" go on to be drafted by NFL teams. That's 54.6%. And it's a small number, but of those players that are 6'6" or taller, 75% went on to be drafted by NFL teams. You talk about guys that have floors that don't go down very far. Their basements are not massive and expansive like some other prospects that you might see. I don't think this kid's one of them. The thing that you can take to the bank from the state of Texas in the last 20 years is that high-level, big defensive ends, guys that weigh more than 230 coming in and are tall, the non-tweener types, those guys are always really solid at worst. And I think in the case of Vasek, I really think we're talking about a guy that could come in and be a multi-year starter and a potential All-Big 12 All-America type player and maybe a first or second day draft pick when it's all said and done. I was not his biggest fan initially, but the more and I really, for the last 5 months, the more I see of Vasek, the more I really like about him, to the point where we get to his senior year and you start to see little snippets of game film from this year come out, and he just looks more explosive and more dynamic and more of a game changer. And it's why when he commits to Oklahoma, it's a massive loss. When Jamel Johnson,
Texas, he lives in Austin. I mean, you can go through the whole story.
He's buddies with Arch. Like it all felt like it made sense.
I mean, his bookend mate went to
Ethan Berg.
Ethan Berg signed with Texas last year. Everything about it made sense, and then he bucks the trend to go to Oklahoma. So, the only thing people will remember 3 or 4 years from now is that he signed with Texas. But it really was an interesting story. Like at some point, and Colton's pretty private and pretty guarded, but I want to talk to him and his dad and just kind of get the backstory of how this kind of winding road kind of led him way around and then back to UT Austin. But his coach's son, his dad played at defensive line at Texas. He coaches at Westlake. So, I mean, this kid, there's not a mental thing that you can really knock on him. It's not, the effort is going to be there day in and day out. You mentioned his explosiveness. So just to, there's, like you said, there's, in terms of a basement, will he reach that ceiling where he's going to be a first day or 2 day draft pick? I don't know. We'll see. But in terms of the low end, his basement, like you said, Ketch, even his basement's pretty damn high. This kid's almost a can't miss prospect, I think.
I was going to mention Jamel Johnson. When he decommits yesterday, my initial reaction to that was, like really good prospect, but he's not in the tier of the super blue chip recruits. And you can find guys in the state of Texas that maybe don't even have quite the ranking of his, but you can still find guys that the high 3-star level, mid 3 stars historically pan out about as well as the guys in his recruiting tier. As much as I hate to say that national 250 guys aren't incredibly valuable historically, they're not much different than the top 700. I think Vasek falls into the category of a rankings tier that's just completely different. And when they lost him to Oklahoma in the summer, I didn't hide the fact that I thought it was a really big deal. This was a guy they really needed in their recruiting class. Now to get him, I just echo kind of the same things we've been saying for months, that especially when you don't get the kid that commits, Brandon Shelby, the only other edge player in this class that I think falls into the super blue chip category. He goes off to USC, and it made getting this kid, Colton Vasek, really even more important.
Isn't it more fun for Texas fans when they get to flip a guy from Oklahoma or Anthony Hill possibly? Isn't it more fun to get him this way than just to have Colton Vasek be like, I'm going to just follow the pattern everybody thought I was going to take, and just my dad went to Texas. I'm from Austin. I'm just going to go ahead and commit to Texas early. Nah, this is a hell of a lot more fun for the fans to get him this way. So
sometimes when fans start talking about when does Flipmas season start, I kind of roll my eyes and think it's not always going to be like that. And then in the course of the last 48 to 72 hours, all of the events beyond this situation having unfolded the way they have. You mentioned Anthony Hill, and it just kind of was like, oh, well, maybe that is a thing, that every year Texas is just going to have some guys that they take from other schools. Joining us right now, he's gracious enough to give us a little bit of his time on what undoubtedly has been a very busy day. Nick Harris from Rivals.com. Nick, your initial reaction. We've been talking for about 15 minutes about the implications of the Longhorns getting this commitment. You've seen him live in person this season. I can still see the video from that visit in my head from Twitter. Your initial thoughts on today?
Yeah, my initial reaction. Well, first off, thank you guys for having me on. My initial reaction is not one necessarily of surprise, but if you had asked me maybe 6 months ago, then yeah, it would have been a surprise at that point. I like to kind of just backtrack when it comes to, big recruitments when they come to their conclusion. And I think it's really important to do that in this sense, because back in the spring, probably going into the summer, this was an Oregon and Oklahoma race. And it kind of felt like he was going to end up at one of those two places without a doubt. There was just no question around it. And if he took some other visits, it was just because he wanted to use all 5. And as we got into the summer, Texas was able to squeak in an official visit, got him in by himself on an official visit. And that was huge. That entire weekend, I think, is what eventually laid the groundwork for today to happen, even though he did commit to Oklahoma in the time being since. But making that commitment to Oklahoma, Texas was right there, number 2. They had surpassed Oregon, which was a childhood favorite of his. He really loved the Oregon program, loved his visit up there and Dan Lanning. But Texas was able to overcome that and get into that second position and almost won the first time around. And then they never stopped communication after he committed to Oklahoma. They were able to get him in for a visit for the Iowa State game. And then last week, very under the radar and secret, they were able to bring him in for a practice visit, got him in midweek. And that's when the wheels really started churning towards this flip happening today. If you had asked me a couple weeks ago, whenever I had seen Vasek last against Dripping Springs, coming out of that conversation with him, I felt as though this would happen, but it would probably happen towards signing day or on signing day, and very low key. Vasek didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but it does make sense that he's going ahead and getting this out of the way before his playoff run. This will be able to kind of help him focus on this playoff run. Westlake's trying to go for a 4th straight consecutive state title, and he really wants to focus on that. He's a team first guy. So, it's a big day for Texas, and my initial reaction, not too much of surprise, but in the overall context of it, yes.
Nick, and again, give Nick a follow on Twitter at RivalsNick on Twitter. By all means, give him a follow. We were talking about his value as a prospect and our anticipation based on just how well he's played as a senior, that he's potentially in a position to rise in the rankings, currently ranked higher by Rivals than anybody else in the industry. And yet, yes, exactly. There you go, Nick. But by the same token, this isn't a guy that feels like he's plateaued from junior to senior year. It feels like he's been an even more dynamic player as a senior. What has been your impression from where he's ranked now to where he might look or where he might rank? And I realize there's only so much room for him to go at this point. I mean, he's 82nd in the country. That's not by any means an insult. But your thoughts on the improvement that he's made just in the last few months?
Yeah, absolutely. Before the last rankings meeting, which was in August preseason, before his senior season even started, I was kind of toying with either Braylon Shelby or Colton Vasek. Which one of those guys did I feel like had the higher ceiling, is better than the other, at least at that time. At that point, I had chosen Braylon Shelby just based on his physical measurements, what he's been able to do on the track and field, his explosion off the line, all of those really just jumped off the charts. And while Colton has those same kind of aspects, he doesn't have as much athletic context as Braylon does. And so I decided to put Braylon above him in that upper tier, and then Colton in that 75 to 90 range. And that's ended up where he ended up falling. But as both of their senior seasons have kind of progressed, I think we could see Colton probably move ahead of Braylon, just because of what he has done on the field. I mean, he's been incredibly violent. He's translated everything that he's done over the offseason onto the field, while also retaining a lot of the big things that made him a very outstanding junior player, especially in that playoff run for Westlake. And I'm going to be really curious to see how he does up against really stiff offensive lines here in this playoff run. I'm curious to see who they run into. I think that'll be a really big measuring stick, and I will be watching very closely when it comes to how far up he could be moving up in the ranks. But I mean, I can give you this. He's moving up at least 10 spots.
Jason, any questions?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I agree with everything Nick said. We kind of saw this one coming, but I think like Nick, the timing of it maybe was a little escalated a little quicker than I thought. But I don't know, maybe, Nick, is there anybody you kind of maybe would compare him to, that you've covered here in the last few years?
Oh, goodness. It's
tough to put
tough
someone on the spot with that question.
Yeah,
right?
that's a tough comparison. I think, I think maybe just like, I would say his ceiling is an Aiden Hutchinson type of ceiling. But I think the floor is a lot lower than obviously what Aiden Hutchinson was able to do in his college career. Because I mean, at the end of the day, Texas getting these blue chip type recruits, they have to still develop them. And, what does that look like under Pete Kwiatkowski and this defensive staff? Still kind of waiting to be seen. I mean, there are some guys that have definitely progressed from year one to year two under that staff, but, what does that look like for an entire recruiting class? And that's still something we can't really judge quite yet. So, I mean, the developing aspect, I think, will be a big part of, what makes or breaks Vasek in his time in Austin. But, I mean, he's been able to retain so much knowledge from being in his household. I mean, his dad is a defensive line coach, has coached at Duncanville. He's coached at Austin Westlake, obviously. So, he's got the resume himself, and it runs in his blood. So, I think he has probably a better chance than other guys that'll be walking in that same defensive line room. But at the end of the day, it does come down to developing.
And he's got a talented younger brother, right, Nick?
Yeah, he does have a younger brother. He's not quite at the same stage that Colton was at that point, but I think he will end up being a FBS Power 5 type recruit if he kind of continues on the same line of success.
You know what I like the best about Colton Vasek, Catch, and Nick too? You guys will appreciate this. First off, we were tipped off he's going to flip, so we all knew it was coming. He said it's going to happen at 4:00, and it happened at 4:00. Man,
yeah.
So we didn't have to be handcuffed to our computers every second, just wondering when it was going to go down. So
4:00 meant 4:00 and not 4:37.
Exactly, dude. I love it.
Not even 45 seconds on the hour. It's just it's happening.
Yeah.
No, it was kind of surprising. I had that because I told people, Jason, on our site, hey, we're going live right after 4:00, and then there was a part of me that thought, oh God, what if it's 4:25 and we've been telling people 4:00? Nick, I wanted to circle back. By the way, my player comparison, Jason, that I wrote in my instant analysis, Jarvis Moss, a guy that, and I'll tell you why, Nick, because it was a word that you said earlier. They both have similar frames. If you go back and look at what Jarvis Moss was in high school, he was like 6'6", 6'7" listed. He also right around 230 pounds. They physically kind of match up. Vasek has had this thing this season. Every time anybody from the recruiting industry goes to a game, and this includes Nick, and I would suggest, I had this out like 3 weeks ago, but it's from maybe like 6 or 7 weeks ago when Nick, maybe the first game he saw of Colton earlier this season. He's just so violent upon contact this year. It feels like every week I see that dude hit a guy that it looks like a car crash when it happens, as opposed to just making an athletic play or just looking really quick off the edge. There is a violence in his play that feels a little unique, enough that I notice it, right? Like, there are normal levels of violence in the game of football when a pass rusher hits a player in the backfield. And then there is this thing that he's been able to tap into this year that might be the number one thing that stands out to me about him as a player right now. He's really quick. He's really athletic. But his ability to put a real wallop on somebody when he gets to them, quite frankly, it's been pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, and that just kind of speaks to his technique and what he's been able to learn from his pops and the great defensive staff that is at Westlake. I mean, when you have technique that can set you up in positions to make those kind of plays, you can make those kinds of plays and make those kind of tackles. So I think it's all just kind of a trickle-down domino effect, starting with his technique and just what he's learned as learning in that position. But he's definitely going to get one or two of those weak rough in the passer calls at some point in his college and or NFL career. Like it will happen, just because he doesn't know how to not make a violent impact. He's going to do it. Maybe he'll have to be more cognizant on the QB, if they're wearing the red shirt.
No, you're right. I mean, you can almost close your eyes and imagine very early in his career just putting it on somebody and then having to go over to the coach and apologize. Like, I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
There's one clip in his senior film I was watching before he came on, and he gets a free run at the quarterback. How the hell that happens, I don't know. But like, he literally goes airborne and vaults himself in. And I'm like, oh, that's probably going to draw a flag at some point. But
I know what play you're talking about. And I remember seeing that play on Twitter, and just, again, like once a week I see that dude hit somebody, and it just causes me to cringe a little bit. Like, did you just take 6 months off some kid's life? Like, that kid would have otherwise lived to 87, but now because you just hit him like that, it's 85 and a half. Like, he gets his money's worth when he puts it on a guy. And so far this season, he's had a few free runs too, Jason. Like that 4-game highlight reel, I just thought to myself, surely by week 8, the opponents will figure out, just for the health of your own players. Hey, honestly, he should be on the TCU defense. They injure a quarterback every week. He'd be, right at home on that team.
Credit. He completed that pass, though, man. I don't know how the hell he did it. He stayed in the pocket, took the hit, and completed the pass. So
kudos to him.
Yeah, figure out who that kid is, man.
Hey, Nate, last question, then we'll let you go. I know it's a busy day for you. It's hard not to think about him and Ethan Burke playing together as, bookends of that. What is now, it's a pretty historical little run that Austin Westlake is having. That defense has been front and center. I think back even to the game against Quinn Ewers when Burke would have been a junior and Vasek would have been a sophomore. But even then they were playmakers early in their careers, not late. Anybody, any other school, any other tandem that you're thinking about that in recent years, 2 national top 100 type guys? I would imagine that IMG would be a team that has had something like that. But, I'm having a hard time thinking of a team that, we'll look back on in 10 years from now, potentially. I mean, a lot still has to happen with these guys in college, but it's real easy, I think, for me to think that in 10 years we'll be talking about. Remember when Westlake had that run and they were really good all over the field, but man, defensively they got after it against guys. Anybody else that you can think of?
Are we just talking pass rush here?
Yeah, like bookends.
I would say, Denton Ryan, whenever they had Jatavian coming off the edge, and Anthony Hill was really young, a young pup.
Yeah.
All over the place. That was a lot of fun. Last year with Zeno Omozolo and David Hicks at Allen, they had quite a bit of fun together. Granted, David was playing more interior, and then Zeno was right next to him. So you basically had to double team 2 guys on one side of the line. It was just physically impossible. And they got a lot of free runs of the quarterback. I'm thinking mostly statewide. If we look nationally, IMG, of course, St. Francis Academy, modern day. They've had some teams in the past 3 to 5 years that have been scary when it comes to the pass rush. But this Westlake run it's been quite impressive. And I'm glad you brought up Ethan Burke, because I think there's a fun little context to Ethan Burke and kind of his story. He only played football his senior year, and that was a technique that his progression that he saw from the first game of his senior year to the state championship, and just kind of seeing that line. It speaks to the coaching staff at Westlake and the defensive staff that they have, and his position coach, which was Vasek's dad. So now you're getting Ethan Burke 2.0, who has been living under that coach's household his entire life. So, take that for what you will.
Interesting little stuff. Jason, any other final comments, or can we just wrap this bad boy up and sign off?
I think we can wrap it up. Big start to the week for Texas fans. Big weekend coming up with a lot of visitors on campus. We got the Anthony Hill news, which is a whole other video discussion, but we'll be watching that situation closely. So fun times for Texas fans, man. Recruiting can be up and down, but enjoy it while it's up, and it's certainly trending up for Texas right now.
Nick, while we've got you, I'll let you have the final word. Just in general, Texas recruiting, Jason's referenced really this early part of this week with Anthony Hill's announcement, and then a number of guys saying that they are going to be at this weekend's game on Saturday against TCU. Peyton Bowen not among them, as you reported over at Orangebloods roughly 90 minutes ago. But you can see that, The Rock has got something cooking over here with regards to some momentum with their season starting to look like it might just be a success when it's all said and done. Just your general impression of what's happening right now for the Longhorns at the top end of the recruiting class, really specifically inside the state of Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. Texas has been able to take advantage of, kind of some underwhelming seasons around the region. Texas A&M and Oklahoma, of course. I mean, flipping a commit from Oklahoma today, and still working on Anthony Hill, flipping him from Texas A&M. So, yeah, bringing in Anthony Hill this weekend is absolutely massive, especially if the Longhorns can go ahead and close on him this weekend. I think that's probably going to be, the mindset going in with the coaching staff is they don't want him to leave Austin, not committed, because that's when other schools could get involved, such as LSU, USC, maybe even Oklahoma. So that'll be one thing I'll be watching this weekend pretty closely, as well as Jelani McDonald. I think that's somebody that Texas could be closing in on here pretty soon. He's still kind of evaluating his options, so it might not happen in, before signing day necessarily. But that definitely is one that I'll be watching. Tausili Akana, more national based recruit out in Utah. I think it's going to come down to Texas and Oklahoma, and we'll kind of see how that fight plays out down the stretch. But overall, I think I would say I'm surprised by the way Texas has been able to retain its big top-time recruits. Whenever they had that big run in the summer of a lot of commits right after Arch committed, I kind of looked at it afterward and I was like, I could see about 2 or 3 of those guys decommitting, and none of those guys have. So, I think that speaks to the staff and being able to, stay communicative with those guys. And I think they'll be able to kind of retain most of those guys down the stretch. So I think it's going to be a fun stretch if you're a Texas recruiting fan, and, Orangebloods is the best place to follow it.
Read his stuff over at rivals.com. He's got stuff seemingly every day over on the network. Follow him on Twitter at RivalsNick. Read Jason Sukumel's stuff over at orangebloods.com. Both of us, Jason and myself, with stories already out on Colton Vasek's commitment to the University of Texas in this hour. Fellas, thanks for helping us make this video. All of you in the chat, thanks for hanging out and watching us talk a little football recruiting on a Tuesday. You guys be good.